It's 6:16 on my clock, so I'll call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order on December 16th. And we have one item on our agenda today. Consider utilization of TID1 extension funds for infrastructure improvements to improve the housing stock. And we have a memo here that's prepared by Ewald. And so I will hand it off to her.
I don't have anything further other than what was written in the memo. If there's any questions, I'm happy to address it. But if not, I think the purpose of the meeting is really to have this group discuss the policy decision at hand.
Okay, if okay, I'll go ahead and start with some questions. I was at a meeting with Manager Ewald and Attorney Bayer and our finance team last week discussing what legally we could do, and that's pretty much outlined here. Attorney Bayer felt that using TID extension money for streetlights would be difficult to defend, or not as easy to defend as a use as lead service lines and water mains. And he also had spoken with people at the Department of Revenue who felt similarly. So that's a little background there. I guess part of me is wondering, looking at other things that are on our agenda tonight. For example, one of the things that is very appealing to me is trying to use this money in that census tract that is most eligible for just there's a lower income level, and so that makes the residents in that area more eligible for more subsidies, let's say, like the loan forgiveness. The rate goes higher. I think it's 100% forgivable loan, 100% forgivable loan principal. And so I'm interested in knowing if there's something we could do. And if it's my understanding that the lead service lines are funded, the private side is going to be funded by our grant program, and then the loans that we'll give them, which they will pay back through their utility bills quarterly for 3 years. To me, this is a perfect example. If we could use some of the money to help people in that situation, or if we could use it to, for example, repair the water mains in that part of the village so that we could get it all done sooner instead of waiting. And so I guess Attorney Bayer is not here, but that's something I would be interested in seeing, if we could help that census tract that has been identified as more of an income level that would allow us to get more help. Could we use that in that area specifically, or what other ideas? You know, the other thing that was particularly appealing to me was that we could save over $250,000 on debt service, because obviously that's money that we could use toward raises or doing more lead service lines or something like that. So I guess I'm looking at both 2025. We talked at our meeting last week what we could do yet for the 2025 budget. We could amend it if we decided to use this money, or we could use it going forward to 2025. You know, for projects that would be done in 2026, because the 2025 budget, we'd have to amend it. So I'd be looking for some finance direction on those two items. Costs for 2025, or helping to decrease our bonding. Do you have a recommendation if we decided to use the 25% of the extension funds for infrastructure? Would you see them better used going to decrease our debt load, or could we put them right into a cash flow project for 2026 or 25 to get something done more quickly?
I think they're a horse apiece. You need funding on both ends. So once, I guess for purposes of tonight, I think um, the committee, we're looking for the committee to have a recommendation on whether or not to use the funds. If you did then want to use them for purposes that were not affordable housing, then we'll have the next discussion of what would be most beneficial.
I guess it would just be helpful to have some concrete uses. You know, I thought that's what we talked about in the meeting was specifically what could we use it for? And I mean, affordable, I guess what the state law says, affordable housing is also improving housing stock.
We have plenty of uses and availability to use the funding for lead service line projects. It was not my impression that we were going to be specific on exactly what location or specificity tonight, but there's no, I mean, you will need funding for those projects.
Already in 25.
Correct.
We could use some of this money already
Yes.
without amending the budget. Not that, I don't know how involved that is. I didn't,
I would think less about the specifics of it. If you said you wanted to extend it and put it towards lead service lines, we're gonna give you the most financially beneficial recommendation based on that.
okay, I guess my feeling was it's easier to vote yes or no when you have a more specific idea of, you know, instead of like the 30,000 feet, like tell me what this $500,000 could do in 2025 for residents or for the budget. But I understand your point.
So the main thing I think would be to decide whether or not you want 25% of it separated out or not. And then if you decide to separate out the 25%, the $500,000 to use for something else, then it's a decision of whether or not we spend it on the laterals to replace the lead service lines or street light or something else.
And I
The
think,
first question is, do we set it aside or not?
and I think Attorney Bayer felt more comfortable using it for lead service lines or water mains. I know it doesn't mention it specifically here, but he did feel like water mains was easily covered. And so did the Baird gentleman who was the expert at,
Correct. That was my understanding.
he thought water mains and lead service lines were both, would be approved uses. Anybody?
Just from a mechanics perspective, I mean, how long, I mean, there's a long road between now and the next budget, obviously. So if at some point we wanted to, you know, set this aside, what does that look like in terms of providing direction, executing it? I mean, is it a pretty,
The money's already there, so it's
Okay.
as straightforward as, you
okay,
know.
so it's
yep,
just, it's a very straightforward okay,
That's
got it. Okay, there's no special
no
steps or anything
special
else.
transfers or anything like that. It's just a matter of policy.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we obviously have a long road ahead of us, and I don't really feel, well, first off, I'm glad that we're looking at this as an option. I appreciate Trustee Stokebrand raising the issue. You know, there's a lot of moving parts in the budget, and there's going to be a lot of moving parts in next year's budget, the following budgets in the near future, so our foreseeable future. So I think it's good to know that we have this in our back pocket. I'm not really prepared to define any use right now, and you know, if I were forced to take a position, I think my default would be that I would prefer to keep this for you know, maintain this to be used for support actual development versus you know, using it to fund other things is worthy as they are. I you know, I think I don't want to characterize it as a, you know, Band-Aid, but I mean, I just think that there may be a better use. But that said, there's lots to unfold in terms of what our options for development might be in the years ahead. But it's good to know that we have this as an option, certainly open to deploying in it such a way, but would reserve judgment at this point, given that we have the flexibility to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I do not want to pull it from the affordable housing budget. I want to keep 100% of it allocated towards affordable housing. I think, that was a well thought out, well researched and debated issue when it first came forward. I think that board did a good job setting this money aside. I think affordable housing is something that we need in this village, and I don't see any scenario where we won't have to spend some money to produce affordable housing here. And so for me, I'd like to keep it all in there. I mean, I really appreciate learning that we do have access to 25% of it for slightly different uses. But I would rather be focusing our time and energy on figuring out how to use the 2 million or at least the 1.5 million for affordable housing than just focusing on that smaller portion. I mean, if we come up with a great plan and we use 75% of that money at some point and we have 25% sitting left over, great. Let's plug that into something, fill another hole, something like that. But this money was intended for a very specific use that we have not exactly found the right option for yet. And so I think we need to continue to pursue that before we pull 25% out of it.
Having been on the CDA when it was approved and on the village board when it was approved, I can say that at no point was there a discussion that we would or would not separate out the 25%. It was just that the question was, do you want to extend TID 1 for affordable housing? So it's not like we made a decision at that time not to separate it out. That wasn't part of the vote. And what we have learned on the CDA since we started this process is the Village of Shorewood has affordable housing. If you go online, you can Google apartments available for rent, and we have a lot of options that fall into the 60% or less of, I think it's called the local median income. So we do have affordable housing in Shorewood. I think the thing that people don't understand who maybe haven't followed the process is that this is more of an attempt to integrate our community and finding a way to do that. So because the legislation is called affordable housing, that's what it's called in our documents. But we do already have affordable housing, much more than other communities on the North Shore. So I guess the thing that would be interesting to me to know then is that we have this available, and as we go through the 2026 budget process, this is something that we would have available if we wanted to, when we're looking at the long-range financial plan, for example, or when we're looking at potential tax levy increases for 2026 to try to smooth it out. This is something that we would have available to us. So we could defer, or we could just move it forward to the board as a whole. I don't know if you have a feeling for move it forward without any recommendation, or we could take a vote if someone has a motion.
I don't see the need any action right. Personally, I don't see the action right. I mean, more clarity than we had going into this discussion in terms of what acceptable uses are. So in knowing that, this is something that we can act needed and deemed appropriate as an option. I mean, I'm good with my knowledge base right now.
Yeah, same. I mean, I think, should we do option 1 as the motion to close this out? I mean, I think that's probably the cleanest way. I don't want to kick it to the full board. Just have this exact same, reach this exact same conclusion.
I guess it depends on what your definition of affordable housing is. So we know that improving your housing stock also counts as affordable housing. So I guess I would be more comfortable not taking any action because I want to have this available yet when we get down to figuring out what the tax levy increase is going to be for next year. I still want to have this $250,000, I'm sorry, $500,000. I think it's important that we have that flex. I would prefer to take no action.
Do we need to take an action on this, or are we good just having the conversation?
Well, it was listed to consider it because that's how it was proposed during their future item of consideration. So that's how it comes to you with that language. If the direction is no direction at this time, I still think that the village board will desire a report from you, verbal or otherwise.
I mean, I think we need
Then-
to vote for option one. That leaves us exactly the same place as where we started. The money's not available to us. The money is still available to us, and we can still revisit this at any time. We're just saying at this moment in time, we're continuing to reserve 100% as the original, intention.
Mhm.
So I'll make that motion. I move to continue to reserve 100% of the additional increment collected from the TID 1 extension for affordable housing.
Second.
I'd like to make an amendment that we would retain the flexibility of using 25% to improve housing stock.
That already is there. There's no need to say that.
I think it's important to make it clear that we want to retain the flexibility, to use
The
it later.
clarity is in the law, though. Whether we say it or not means nothing and changes nothing and accomplishes nothing.
I disagree.
Well,
It has meaning to me,
I mean,
and I think it would for the.
okay, I disagree. So the motion is what it is. Can we call it a question or?
So there was a motion for the amendment. Is there a second?
There was. Jim seconded it, the original.
No, for the amendment that you're looking to make.
No, I guess not.
No, I mean, I agree with Jerry. I mean, I think this is a point in time. It's inherent. The flexibility to change is inherent in that. We can share that direction with the board as.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I'm happy with this, that we went through this discussion and we found this 25% was available to us. I think that's a good thing. I think we just need to keep it as clean as possible and just, we're still where we are. When we get to a different place, we'll tackle it at that time.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries 2-1. And I believe that's it for our agenda tonight. And so is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries and we adjourn at 6:35.
All right, I would like to call to order the Judiciary Personnel and Licensing Committee at 6:46 PM. All members are present. And on today's agenda, we just have the one item to review. And that's the next step for non-compliance with policy 33, attendance and training requirements for volunteer committees and elected officials. I'll just start by asking if there's an update from staff other than what's in the memo. Otherwise, happy to kind of start the discussion.
No update.
So it looks like where we're at is there are 22 members of various committees and boards in the village who have not completed all of the required trainings. And we're past the deadline at this point. So we have to kind of make a decision. Did either of you have any initial thoughts to start the discussion, or where do we want to go with this? Go ahead, yeah.
I'm wondering legally if because it is the first time we've ever done this, are we legally in any jeopardy by providing a 60-day window? I guess the problem now is we're in the holidays. Are we legally in any jeopardy if we give people 30 more days?
It's a policy that's established by the board, so it's within the board's purview to provide the direction and how they'd like me to proceed.
And my next question is, I wonder if it would be meaningful to have a committee chair contact residents on these committees. Do we have access to phone numbers for these people?
We do, in previous communication with committee chairs, they've requested not to be involved in the compliance process. And at the time, it was not identified that committee chairs would be involved in that process. So that was communicated to them. If we'd like to change that, I can definitely reach out to the committee chairs. But up until this point, it's been communicated to them that they have not been involved in the compliance process.
That to me seems like a fairly natural segue, especially when we're in this transition period where it's a brand new policy. I'm just wondering too, what's this, are we like a 25% that have done it, and are we like 50%? Any idea?
Around 75.
Oh, 75% completion. So that's pretty good. The other thing is, I have to say, having served on the Recreation Advisory Committee, you kind of feel a little bit disconnected there. You're half school board appointees, half village board appointees. And I don't know if the school doesn't require this, so I'm just saying that might be an explanation for that. I don't know who the chair of that committee is, but I guess I would be looking to give everybody a 30-day appeal process, and hopefully we could make this more publicized. For example, has this been at all in the manager's memo? By the way, if you serve on a committee, we instituted a new policy. Have you done we need to do this to keep our IT system safe and secure. Training is critical and required, so please be sure, and if you haven't done your training. I guess the civic engagement is great, and I'm looking for a way to help make it easier for people to comply.
Yeah, I mean, well, just looking at this list, I mean, I think there's one person on this, not a resident. I'm in a
Who is
previous,
it, just so I know for the list?
Catherine Cam. I mean, if I guess my bias is I'm not really disposed to, telling me 20-ish, or various words right now, and that, I mean, that is a significant step. Given that, I mean, if we can, if someone can text them or some otherwise, otherwise reach out to them directly, in this special circumstance where the, option is, ending their service, I'd be supportive of that and giving attention on completing this. That extension would get drop dead, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, I recognize some may have some preferences, but I mean, I would rather just take that step in this specific circumstance, go from. And the fact that 20 of these haven't done any suggests that not, I mean, that they're not necessarily looking at their emails, so that's going to be a very productive.
That was.
I just had a question. The third option, request the village manager's office send correspondence. Does that, should I infer that that means a snail mail letter, or is that an email?
It can be whatever communication you'd like.
Obviously the good news about a snail mail letter is it would be different and perhaps more it would catch someone's attention more. The bad news is it would go out the week before Christmas. And so I guess I would be inclined to choose number 3, but make it January 31st.
These were I was just brainstorming things to give you guys a starting point for discussion, so it's really whatever you'd like to do.
That's perfect. Yeah, that was kind of my general question as well. Are these emails, these Village of Shorewood emails, are these the only emails that we have communicated this message to these individuals on? Do we know? Okay, okay.
Yep.
So similarly, I'd like to, what my option choice would be to extend the timeline a little bit. I see no problem with January 31st. It gives a whole nother month to get it done. There's no reason it can't get done at that time. And then to mail a physical letter, because I'm suspecting that some of these people who are on these boards, especially if they're boards that don't meet very often, they may not be looking at their village email consistently enough to get that. So I would like to, my general thought would be to send one more email to this email, send one little postcard or some, quick, easy mailer asking to complete it and to do it through the Village of Shorewood email, extend the deadline, and then when that deadline is up, if they still haven't completed by the deadline, rather than resign, ask them to come to the next JP&L meeting. And if they don't come to that meeting, then we could submit resignation. Is that too big of a timeline? Does that make sense?
Would you want to reach out by phone or no?
My thought would be, at this time, I don't think we need to make 22 phone calls. That takes longer than, I personally don't want to make 22 phone calls this week. But if we make it to that second JP&L meeting, assuming that list has gone down, I think at that point, maybe a phone call. What do you think?
I think that it would be helpful. I don't remember the process we went through here though, but it would seem to me a committee chair, that's a responsibility of being a committee chair, is being in regular contact with your committee members. And so who's showing up for the meetings and who's not. And I guess we could check and see, but if every committee is going to get together before, I think we want this to be January 31st, 2025, just make sure that ask every committee chair, or if they're not going to be there, their designee, to mention to the committee members and have a list there. Say, you need to do this because it's important to internet security for the village.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the steps Jerry takes recommended, plus reaching out to the committee chairs with that direction. And if that's too much for them, that's a different discussion. But
To plug it on just at least plug it on the agenda, like you said, that just check if you're on the list.
So are we agreed then, excuse me, we would like a US postal warning, I'll
Mhm.
call it a warning, with a January 31, 2025 date, to comply, or be at the next JPNL meeting. So then you're gonna have to let them know when it is, right? I mean, that gets a little wrinkly, right? 'Cause we can't-
Whatever the first JPL meeting in February.
I would do it at the second meeting in February.
Okay.
Okay,
So we have the date. That's
Okay,
not hard to put
all
in.
right,
I think it's helpful because then at least provides notice.
on the same correspondence, the same mailed correspondence.
Yep.
So here's, Plan A is you need to do it. Plan B is, or step 2 is, if not, you will be asked to attend the February meeting to tell the committee, JPNL committee, why you should still be on the committee.
I think that's the plan, yeah. Will we also just send one more email, just
Sure, happy to.
hit resend on whatever was previously sent? Okay.
Yep. Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Because trustee Stokebrand brought up a good point about the recreational advisory committee. We don't staff that.
Hmm,
And the other one that we don't do is Board of Health. So each community sends a representative. So I didn't know if you wanted to remove those people from the requirement or still maintain them to have the requirement.
I would be fine with removing them. Based
yeah,
on that distinction.
yeah, so the Board of Health, there's only one shore representative.
Correct.
Is there
Or
one
I
from
think
each?
two. I
Okay.
think two. But yeah, I just didn't know.
And that's
No.
a different, like, health department staff is in charge of those meetings?
Correct.
Okay, then that certainly would be outside the,
But I guess isn't the overriding concern that they're using the village email system and without the training,
So none of these individuals are using the village's email system.
oh,
With the exception of you as elected official, I mean, you're not on the list, but like elected officials. So they don't have village issued emails. It's specifically just for committee training.
oh, okay,
okay.
Yeah.
then I would agree.
Okay. That's helpful for me to
Yeah,
understand.
that makes
so
a
that I
lot of
can
sense.
remove
No,
it.
thank you. That makes,
And then I'll definitely update on that, the DRB member. Thank you for letting me know.
thank you. Okay, yeah, that'd be,
I move to request the village manager's office send US mail correspondence to the non-compliant members, requesting them to comply by January 31st, 2025. And further, if they do not comply, they would be requested to attend the next February meeting of the Judiciary Personnel and Licensing Committee if they wish to continue with their committee assignment. Otherwise, they will be removed by the end of February.
Second.
motion on the floor, any discussion?
Oh, I forgot to put in there something about the committee chair. We can just do that as a
I
directive.
think we just do
separate
that, can we
from
do
the
that as just a
motion.
direction, just because they're gonna be meeting in January? Okay. All right, so are we okay with it as it is? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed, so motion carries. Do we have any further discussion or a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Jared, trustee Underfer said he had a question.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I'm
I
sorry.
walked in very late.
I'm sorry.
and
I did not see. it.
It's
Yep.
it's already done, but I just wanted to clarify that you're sending that out US public mail. Is there any other form of communication, email? Or are you just sending it out? through
No,
mail?
it's gonna be sent via a US postal mail,
Mm.
via email.
Yeah.
And then also I'm gonna communicate with the committee chair to see if they can talk to if there's an individual in there.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
No, no worries, no worries, no worries. Yep. Motion on the floor to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are adjourned at 7 PM on the nose.
Does anybody need a break? Before we go into powering through. All right, are we already recording? So we don't need a. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 7 PM. All trustees, with the exception of trustee McGovern, are here and he is on his way. We have one item this evening, and that is to redraw a draft ordinance for a streetlight charge. I believe that we did receive some questions and comments from the village manager earlier today with regards to this, but other than that, I will hand it over to Manager Ewald to present this.
My apologies, the agenda item is not listed correctly. It was to discuss components of a draft ordinance for a streetlight charge. But as you see within the memo, there was calculations provided by Linear Foot. It was run in two different ways with properties. One was being calculated by linear feet adjacent to the public right-of-way in which a property is addressed. And then the second charged an amount calculated by linear feet of all property abutting the public right-of-way. So this accommodates for corner lots. So they would have two streets of lineal footage for how they would be classified. So in the memo, you'll see in the chart, the category of frontage only versus parcels accounting for that with corners. You'll see the charge per linear foot and then the sum of the frontage that we took off of GIS. And then the sum of the total parcel charge. Initially, when we were going through the high impact options, we had talked about 700,000 revenue per year moving forward, which was an estimate for replacement of the streetlight system. However, the sum of the total parcel charge is also now inclusive of operations and maintenance. So you'll see the new total down there of approximately 739,000. Within your packet, you'll see examples of ordinances from the city of Milwaukee. And in prior meetings, we've also provided ordinances from Baraboo and Prairie du Sac. And for purposes of the meeting tonight, and I know that Attorney Bayer should be on his way. He was coming from an alternative meeting. But what I was looking for some guidance and direction on is between the two options of frontage only, linear feet, or charging parcels with more than one frontage lot line, such as a corner lot. How would you like me to pursue that analysis? This is the calculations that have been done so far in Excel based off what we found. Typically, the next step you would want to take is a more detailed review of the data, just to make sure that with GIS, we're accommodating for the right parcels, that there's not a glitch within the data, because as you can imagine, there's about close to 4,000 line items. So I'll pause if you'd like to discuss among the group, or if you have any
So-
questions that are non-legal related that I can address.
Right. So what you're wanting from us is to discuss different aspects of the policy that, we're comfortable with, not comfortable with, where there are choices, decision points, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay. And then first, as always, any points of clarification from the trustees so that we're all on the same level with understanding of what we're reviewing? Anything that needs to be clarified, definitions, terms? Yes, trustee Stopian.
On page 9 of the packet, it says it is estimated that this cost for 2024 will be 938,500. That should be 2025, right? Is at the top, the first paragraph?
Correct.
Okay. I guess that's my only technical.
Okay. Trustee Ursink.
I guess just kind of going over this and thinking about various residents in the community, I would be more in favor of frontage as opposed to corners. I feel like, we should, as even as we can get this for every sort of resident in the community would be my preference. I would hate to have some of our neighbors have to pay double just because they're on a corner lot. But that's kind of my initial reaction.
Other sentiments, trustee Stokbrand?
I guess I would like to see I would like to see this reduced so that we're only paying for the new street lighting system out of this special charge, which is what was proposed early in the budget process. And I missed one meeting, so I don't know how we got to the point where we're using this special charge not just for the new street lights, which is a fixed time, but it would be operating our streetlights in perpetuity. That's not the intent that I understood that we wanted when we were looking at the big levers. I don't know if it was presented as operation and maintenance too at that time. I thought it was just a charge. We'll use the word charge now because it's important, I think, legally. And I could see doing this because, you know, that we'd bond for it and then we'd pay off the bonds and we'd be done. It seems to me that we're using fee creep to take care of budget problems, which doesn't provide the accountability and transparency that I think residents deserve. And it would be a lot less, quite honestly. You know, I think Milwaukee is something like $1 per linear foot. So I think we need to stick with what we originally talked about doing. My other question is, if we want to start the streetlight project, replacement project in 2025, but we don't have the money yet, and it would be coming out in a separate check on a property tax bill. I honestly don't know if someone can explain, maybe finance can tell me, since it's going to be January and you'd probably want to go out for bids in January, how we can get this up and running fast enough to make it happen, or should we think about starting in 2026?
Manager Ewald, can you field those two questions?
I'll do it to the best of I can. With regards, I believe that the meeting you may have missed, Kathy, was November 18th. It's a memo that I included and recirculated to the board that Attorney Bayer put together. His advisement, and you're correct in that we initially started to talk about replacement of the system only at the time, which is why you see the number, the total dollar amount increase. He's advised that it needs to be operations and maintenance, which is why you see that dollar amount increase. So that's my understanding of his advisement.
Did he say
Second-
why?
Well, he wrote a memo on November 18th. I'm happy to print you out a hard copy.
No, I've read it. I don't understand why an attorney would be making a policy decision for us. Is it impossible to separate out new versus maintenance and operation? Or, because it seems to me that that's an overstretch that's a decision that we should make.
If I may, it's just part of the legal definition. We need to include the operational costs in addition to the capital costs in order to be in compliance.
With regards to the following two questions, the project has been bid for phase one. We're opening those bids on Wednesday, I believe. So for purposes of moving forward in 2025, once the board agrees on how the charge should be calculated, then we will next discuss how to apply the charge in 2025 so that phase one can continue. The board always has an opportunity to delay projects from a fiscal year. And I don't know if you want to comment anymore on the financing component of it.
So it's legally not possible for us to just approve a fee for new streetlights or streetlight replacement.
Not unless we call it a special assessment.
Then it's a special assessment?
Correct.
So can we do that instead of a charge?
There's a policy decision that we won't be doing special assessments that was in place from previous years. So we would have to overturn that at the board level in order to proceed with the special assessment.
So previous
Would-
boards have said there won't be a.
I don't know
It's
if
not
that's
there.
accurate, but when it comes to the specific question, I think that Attorney Bayer should be present. And just because
Sure.
it's his advisement, so I don't want to miscategorize or use the wrong terminology.
Haven't heard.
But Christina, would you be able to comment on the financing for just purposes of 2025?
Yeah, so if we don't collect the revenue until later in the year and we start the projects, we'll just pay ourselves back. It's okay if we collect it a little bit later than intended.
So we have that cash flow.
Yes.
We would, because you wouldn't bond, there wouldn't be time to bond.
We have enough cash flow to float that much for the project. With, yes, with the ins and the outs of the bond issuances, and yeah, we should be able to make that work with the investments we currently have.
Thank you, trustee.
I would also indicate, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that the two are tied together. So I mean, I'm okay with, certainly okay with them being tied together. I think it's actually kind of a nice system that we have for dealing with this. And I think it actually, I mean, I think it's going to work really well for this project. So I'm okay with those two pieces being tied together, certainly.
Do you have any preference pertaining to the corner lot versus frontage?
Oh, yeah, I mean, similar to Trustee Ursink, I don't want to overbill someone just because they happen to live on a corner.
Other trustees?
I would agree with Trustee Lynn in terms of the nature of the charge. I'll recuse the approach, given I'm a corner resident.
Hear you. Trustee Kudo, anything to
I
add?
mean, if we're going around the horn, then I'm with Trustee Ursink.
Okay. Trustee McGovern, we were just reviewing.
I think I'm probably with Trustee Ursink. I think I'd rather not hit people on corner lots twice. So and I like the methodology where you just go with the one side.
Okay. Yes,
I
trustee.
did have
Tucker.
one more question, and Attorney Bear's not here yet, but I would be interested in inserting a sunset clause. But how would you do, that's the problem with linking them together. I think it would be good for taxpayers to know, okay, we have this extra fee, it's to pay for that new light system and the maintenance operation, but there's no end in sight. I mean, if we were just going to do it through an assessment for the new system, you could say 25 years and we're done. Like the stadium charge. And that would be meaningful to people. We did, ironically enough, we just removed the sidewalk assessment fee. Instead of charging everybody separately, now we put that on the property tax. And so now, anyway. I just, operationally too, I'm wondering, which departments does this burden the going forward, depending on which way we charge it? Is it because when we charged people for their sidewalks, that was a big burden, we were told for Public Works. So for this one going forward, where does the burden fall adding this piece? Does it depend on how we do it? Does it depend on if it's property tax bill? How does staff see this?
So two options at least that have been floated so far. There may be more that I'm not aware of because we haven't prepared that next step for you, because it was a part of the next phase of looking at the fee. But one, it can be added as a line item to the tax bill, which is fairly straightforward, because we'll have the information and need to load that within, that big file into the tax database, no differently than we do with assessments and tax information each year. So that's the simplest way, to my understanding, to accomplish inserting the fee. You, in the alternative, have the option of sending out a bill to everyone in the community, similar to how they would receive a water and sewer bill, but would probably just come in a different form, or we'd graphic it in a little bit different way. And then if unpaid, it would be put on the tax bill. I don't know why you'd continue to do it every year like that if you didn't need to, just because it's a administrative next step that really takes place in the finance department. It's just duplicative, and there's more of a straightforward way to do it. But that's two of the concepts that have been discussed so far. And by all means, if you know of more that you'd like to talk about them. All theirs.
Is there a way to just have it be something that comes once a year, you know, like the same time you pay your property taxes so that it's split out in your mortgage payment, like like I pay a mortgage, part of that every month is for property taxes. Can something be done similar to that? So it's spread out monthly rather than, like a quarterly water bill.
lump sum, like an escrow.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to do lump sum in once a year, so line items on the tax bill are not considered, well, you guys, I mean, you know this, not considered taxes. So I don't know, I mean, that would be maybe a discussion between you and the bank in which you escrow. I don't know how they're looking at that bill, but I know that many do separate the two out. Aside from that, we have the water and sewer bills that do go out. You could break up the charge over the course of those payments. I'm just cognizant of the fact that we're going to have a big lift coming into 2025 with the water rate case that we'll be talking about in just a little bit. So I didn't know what the palette was of this group to break apart the fee over the course of the year, which is something, again, it's another billing cycle that's going out. You could include it on those quarterly bills. And then that would function in the same way. I think in general, you don't want to, for efficiency, you don't want to create a new billing cycle for something like this. You want to synergize it with something that you're already doing. Because it's postage and, right? So we just went through sending out a tax bill so that you have like your line item for, paper, copies, mailing house.
Is there a way to resolve this and offer direction, or is that not part of this discussion?
Well, I think one thing that would be helpful for me, just because these types of components would be put into the ordinance, like how we're going to go about deploying it. So if there was the desire of the group to break it apart over the course of, being put as a line item on the utility bill, that's an option that you have. Another option will be to put it on the tax bill. The least efficient option, I believe, would be creating a separate billing. So if you have thoughts as to how you want me to take a look at that, that would be helpful because.
I mean, I guess it'd be helpful for me to know, what's going to cost the village more, like what's inefficient and maybe,
Yeah.
We want to avoid that as well. I mean, I know what I feel as a homeowner and taxpayer is convenient to me, but also don't want to create a bunch of new administrative expense that drives up everyone's expenses as well.
Well,
And what's the
And-
most efficient way to do this? I
I
think?
welcome the opportunity to get back to you on that process because I think we'd want to talk to Paul, who does utility billing. And now that David's gone through the first merging of the tax file into land nav and how that's accounted for, we can have that next discussion. And I'd be happy to come back and share with you what I learned.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both trustees that it doesn't seem to make sense to add another layer to billing to do this independently. However, I would like to better explore making sure that residents have as much of a heads up as humanly possible so that, if it's the tax bill comes in December, just got mine last week, yay, that, we're not just sort of adding lump stuff on in the end. If they can make payments through escrow or through their mortgage payments to take little bites throughout the entire year as opposed to just dumping it at the end, that would be my preference. But one way or the other, I want to make sure that the residents know exactly what's coming and when it's coming so that those who are on fixed income, and there are a number of them, can plan accordingly, whether that's going to their mortgage company and saying, I need to set aside a little bit more, or that just setting aside extra in their own personal finances. I just, it's a matter of no surprises would be my preference. And then as outlined, the number 3 option of doing a new billing cycle just doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Okay. Very helpful feedback that now we can take back and take a look at as we look at language and potential drafting of how that would look in an ordinance format. I think that that would be our next step together. I'd probably want to take this feedback that we learned tonight, put that into an ordinance format, and then get your eyes on it again, including the information that we learned from Paul and we discussed in terms of what's more efficient from the tax bill versus the utility bill.
Do we know in these other examples, are they all billed? Are they billed on Milwaukee, do the utility bill? Would be quarterly? Is there a common thread among the ones that we looked at, Baraboo and?
We can definitely look. I know the ordinances need to specify where it is, and then we'll also specify the year. So there are some communities, I believe Milwaukee or one of the Prairie du Sacs, I'm sorry, I don't have those ordinances in front of me, goes from like December 1st to November 30th, and some communities go in the fiscal year. So those are some of the things that we can weed out now that we've kind of have some guidance from you regarding billing and how that cycle, how you want us to look for the most efficient option. So then we could provide some suggestions to you in terms of how that would look in an ordinance format.
The other thing that I'd be curious in how is the final charge, meaning the charge on everyone's utility bill or property tax, will be no greater than the actual cost to provide. So who's going to figure that out?
Actually, that's easy to figure out. So the numbers, as I said before, we already budget separately in a different category for streetlights in general. So that account, well, it's streetlights and then the lighting operations for our signals, which is a part of that.
So this would
system.
not include traffic.
Right now, the budget is set up to include traffic. So that 938 that you see right now is a part of that.
Oh, I thought it was just streetlights, not traffic.
The budget right now, how we set it up includes both of those and how we account for it.
Because in our budget, I mean, in our accounts, the streetlights are separate from traffic. So can't we separate out traffic? I mean, well, I think
That's
when we
something that
talk
I'd need
about
To ask
it's smaller.
Leanne and Dan, and I would not expect for them to be able to comment on it right now, but something food for thought for you guys to think about. The bulk of it is street lighting.
Do we need to separate it? I mean, do we need to separate it out? I don't think that's necessarily a need. I think it's okay the way it is.
I'm happy to take a look at it.
Streetlights are very different than traffic stoplights. Whole different function. They're
I hear both.
they're
I
really
hear,
different
I hear
lights.
both of them. I think that that's something, again, that we can talk about and bring back some information on. But there was, Kathy, there was another point you were getting to. Oh, the actual cost. Okay,
So
so
it's not like they get a bill and they say, oh, it cost $700 to fix streetlights in that part of the village this year, the new streetlights, but it cost $200,000 to repair the streetlights somewhere else. So we wait for all those invoices to come in. That's not.
no, so in here, we're just accommodating for the estimated cost of maintenance of the system, which is in our case replacement, and then the operational cost. And so those two
Like
are
the electric bill.
correct, and the staff to go out and service the streetlights and things of that nature. So those are combined, and then every year, remember, we're gonna adjust those numbers to be accurate based upon what we're actually gonna be bonding for. So the estimates on the system are just estimates.
It's
Right
not
now.
actual cost.
Correct, but then every year when we get those actuals, I do want to insert that, right? So you're gonna have a budget every year that's gonna define your operational charge, and then your capital expense, or the part that you'd be bonding for, will also be defined. So no differently, we're gonna have phase one, we're preparing for the 2025 bonding. On Wednesday, we'll have bids come in for that phase one system. We have an estimate, right? But now we're gonna see that hit market. And I'm sure, if the implementation of phase one goes through over this year, we're gonna learn a lot, right? So maybe there'll be some things that will adjust for the next year, but they have the estimated phases and what that accommodates for spread over time. But it's the total of those improvements that would be spread out over the bond. So that will recalculate, but you'll hit a point where like your capital expenses will be what they are after the phases are implemented. And then really, ideally, you know, what you're gonna see is electric decrease, right? So as systems
LED
come
light.
online, then everyone benefits from what that decrease would be. And it just kind of happens more in real time, but we adjust it. So that it would just be that lighting. I'm sorry. Did where were we?
Oh, that's
Equitable
really
fund.
helpful, because yeah, that was, I mean, that's the goal, I think, so thank you for clarifying.
So this has been very helpful for me in terms of receiving guidance. Christina, can you think of anything else that I'm not? This was helpful to understand where the group was.
I can't see Christina, so you're behind the, is that a no? Okay, you're good. All right. Well, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good
Motion-
work.
Motion
Mo-
to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by trustee Stokbrand, seconded by trustee Kudo. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 7:27. We'll convene at, convene at 7:30 for village board.
Thanks. That was helpful.
Yeah, making progress.
Water bill
Like, you-
separately,
Yeah.
and the tax
Building.
roll, that, you know, is all.
I know. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the village board to order at 7:32. All trustees are present. Has this been publicly noticed?
The meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for your time, talent, and patience in advance as we conduct business this evening. We have several special orders of business this evening. 4A, the 2023 audit from Sikich. Mr. Sikich, would you like to join? Just say,
Should we move that mic over? Just want to stand in the corner.
so for recording purposes, we need you to speak right into the microphone so that you can hear yourself.
I can do that.
Excellent.
Would you like that desk too, or are you good?
No, I'm fine with this. Thank you very much, though. Well,
Okay.
good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to present the results of our audit of the village as of and for your fiscal year
Yeah, there you
ended
go.
December 31st, 2023. I'll keep my comments relatively brief this evening, as obviously this is pretty dated information in terms of that. I do want to thank the village staff for all of their efforts in preparing for the audit this year. Obviously, there's been a lot of change within the finance department, a lot of turnover within there in terms of timing for when things were originally scheduled, when we were able to do the audit. Hence why we're here. We've been done almost a month at this point now. And then I know we had a little bit of a snafu with the meeting earlier this month on that. So happy to be here this evening presenting these results for you as part of that. If you have the information in front of you, I'll give you page numbers within the annual financial report. I also have, if you're following along online, the packet page numbers. So page 14 is the page within the packet entitled the annual financial report. This consists of your main, your basic financial statements. All of the key information, the detailed information is presented within this document. Page 19, if you turn to page 19 in the packet, or page 1 of the report, which you'll find on Sikich letterhead. This is titled the Independent Auditor's Report, and I'm pleased to present to the board this evening that we did issue a clean, unmodified opinion on the village's financial statements as of and for your fiscal year ended December 31st, 2023. As a reminder, that clean, unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as auditors. It means the financial statements based on our audit, in our opinion, are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So do want to congratulate you for the receipt of that unmodified opinion on the financial statements. The remainder of the report goes into more detail in terms of how we conducted our audit, conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. Those are set forth by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, or AICPA. Management ultimately retains responsibility for these financial statements. Our responsibility, again, as auditors to issue an opinion based on our audit. Following the independent auditor's report on page 23 of the packet, or page MD&A1, the management's discussion and analysis. Management's discussion and analysis serves as the executive summary component within your annual financial report. So if you're talking to others and saying this is a 75+ page document, where do I focus on? What do I look at as part of that? The management's discussion and analysis is a great place to direct someone's attention to that there. It includes information from both 2023 as well as 2022. I think the most valuable piece, though, is management actually gets the chance within this section to explain why those figures have changed from one year to the next. So it takes a lot of the financial data, provide some context for you in terms of understanding that, or your financial statement users to look at that. Following the management's discussion and analysis, you'll come to the basic financial statements starting on page 4 or page 39 of the packet. This is titled the Statement of Net Position. The Statement of Net Position and the following schedule, the Statement of Activities, are presented on what we refer to as the Economic Resources Measurement Focus and the full accrual basis of accounting. That means that these schedules and these statements include all of the village's capital assets, as well as your long-term liabilities, other debt, pension liabilities, other post-employment benefit amounts, et cetera. They're intended to present a big picture overview of the village's finances at December 31st, 2023. Main columns here that will focus on the governmental activities. This is your general fund and your other tax supported fund, your business type activities, including your water sewer fund. And then you do have the component unit column on the far right there. The bottom of the following page, page 5 or page 40 in the packet, you'll find a section titled Net Position. This is what we call equity within the governmental fund or governmental financial space for that there. So you'll see your net position is broken into 3 categories: your net investment in capital assets. This is your capital asset balances, less any debt that was issued to fund those capital assets. You then have various restricted net position categories, and then ultimately it comes down to an unrestricted net position. For your governmental activities, your unrestricted net position, just under $3.2 million of a deficit at December 31st, 2023. That's related to the fact that you have issued debt that has not generated capital assets. So while the capital assets reside in that net investment and capital asset number, you have other debt along with pension liabilities and other amounts that do impact that unrestricted line. Again, that's a number that you're going to really look at once a year in terms of that. So I'll highlight the fund balance of your general fund, your main operating fund, in just a second. The following page presents your statement of activities. Your statement of activities on pages 41 and 42. This is a unique presentation that we see within the governmental financial statements or within a government's financial statement. You start with your expenses on the left-hand side, then offset by your program revenues, including your charges for services, as well as any operating grants and contributions or capital grants and contributions. Brings you to a net expense or revenue for each of those respective functions for your governmental activities, as well as your business type activities. Those are then offset by your general revenues. Your general revenues on the bottom of page 7 or page 42 in the packet, your property taxes being the largest piece there. Then it brings you to the third line from the bottom, your change in net position. Your change in net position for your governmental activities, just over $3 million of an increase for fiscal 23, $895,000 for your business type activity. So overall, as a whole, village's net position increased by $3.9 million for fiscal 2023. The 2 pages immediately following there are the balance sheet for your governmental funds. I mentioned earlier that the statement of net position that we looked at was presented on that full accrual basis and the economic resources focus there. Now we're looking at the current financial resources, what we call the modified accrual basis. This is more what you're accustomed to seeing on a month in, month out basis in terms of financial data there. We've removed those capital assets from the presentation. We've removed those long-term liabilities here, much more operationally focused here. Within the general fund, looking at the general fund, you have your other major funds presented there. So your debt service, your general capital projects, and then as well as your TID districts. Where I'd like you to focus your attention is on the bottom of page 10 in the report, which is your balance sheet and your general fund balance. While it's referred to as net position on the statement of net position, we call it fund balance in the general fund. You'll see your general fund had unassigned fund balance at December 31st of a little over $5.9 million. That $5.9 million represents about 44% of your general fund revenues for fiscal 23, about 48% of your general fund expenditures there. The MD&A goes into more detail, as well as the fund balance notes and the notes to the financial statements regarding the village's fund balance policy. So you do maintain kind of a 30% reserve for that, and then other amounts are available for future spending needs. Turning a few pages past the governmental funds balance sheet, we'll come to the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, pages 13 and 14 of the report. Again, same major fund presentation here, focusing on the general fund. General fund for the year had an increase just over $1 million. So you went from 5.6 to just under $6.7 million in fund balance within your general fund. The last item that I'll cover in my comments for this evening is in the separately issued auditor's communication to the Board of Trustees and management. Just wanted to highlight for you in terms of the comments from the prior year. We had 3 comments in last year's management letter referencing various items that were noted during the course of the audit. The first of those is a segregation of duties comment related to payroll controls. We have repeated that comment this year, also included is management's explanation that they believe that based on the staffing constraints and other policies and safeguards that they have in place, that risk is sufficiently mitigated. Anytime you think about internal controls, anytime you think about segregation of duties and how things are separated there, you do want to be able to look at that from a cost benefit standpoint there. So ultimately, that is management's decision to make, obviously with the oversight of the board there, that you have adequate policies and procedures in place. We did have 2 other comments in the prior year related to bank reconciliations and unavailable revenue. Pleased to report that those comments were not repeated this year. We do consider those comments to be implemented. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of the trustees have. And thank you again for the invitation to be here this evening. Also, I'd be remiss not to thank Rebecca, Christina, and David for all their efforts in terms of that as well. So thank you.
Thank you for that presentation and for your service this year. Any questions from the trustees? Trustee Stokbrand.
I did have one question about, there were 2 references to long-term debt, and it was a different number, and I was under business type activity statement of net position, it said long-term debt increased by 6.395 in 2023, and this is on MD&A 4.
Sure.
And then the preceding page, it has the long-term debt only increased by 1.3. Are they different types of long-term debt? That's on MD&A 3.
MD&A 4 is your business type activities, as you noted there. You said MD&A 3 was the other page?
Right, that long-term debt increased by let's call it 6.4 on the business activity statement of net position. And then the preceding pages said long-term debt increased by 1.3. So are those different types of activities?
They are
That's
correct. The
government and the
governmental activities versus
Okay.
the business type activities.
And then my other question was, we talk about the actuarial, the difference in a decrease largely due to the net pension asset fluctuation from an asset to a liability value due to the updated actuarial valuation. And that was under governmental activities statement of net position.
Are you in the MD&A still?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on at the top of MD&A 3.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, is that a pension change that's going to be, is that a new thing, or is that?
So that relates to, there's a couple amounts that are in the financials that, so that's got the pension liabilities are going to be related to the Wisconsin retirement system or WRS system there. So those amounts there are essentially, you have your contributions as part of that process there, but ultimately the actuary, when they make those determinations there, those actuarial changes, whether it be differences between actual and expected experience or changes to the assumptions that are being used, other things that go into that actuarial calculation there, can cause those amounts to fluctuate from one year to the next. The way that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, has addressed that as they provided those categories related to what we call deferred outflows or deferred inflows of resources that you see on the statement of net position. Those amounts there ultimately, those deferred outflows or deferred inflows essentially serve to smooth the changes in those pension liabilities on a year in, year out basis. So those numbers will fluctuate regularly as part of that, just based on, if in small, what seem to be small changes in the grand scheme of things can have a significant impact on those pension related amounts there. If everyone lives 1 year longer, for example, there, yeah, that obviously extends out the cost for that. So the actuaries factor that in based on their various assumptions and other tables that they have as part of their process.
So that's something you do or the WRS does?
WRS engages an actuary to do
Okay.
those calculations, correct?
Okay. All right, and then I just had a quick question about the utility, the sewer and water utility operating income decreased in comparison to 2023 due to reorganization and changes in billing. Maybe that should say 2022. That's on MD&A 9. And I was just wondering, the total seemed, the sewer was bigger than the water, but it was a pretty significant drop in our sewer operating income.
Yes. I don't know if staff has any insight on that particular change. I don't have specific information in front of me related to the sewer year-over-year operating income or loss change.
I know this was a response we had to an audit question as well, so we have a researched answer for you that we can provide after the
Okay.
meeting.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I had.
Thank you. Anything else? Hearing none, we can consider the audit received.
Thank you very much.
I did have one question. So ordinarily, we would see this in May, probably.
I would say
Like-
generally a May or June time.
So in 2025, we can expect a report in May or June.
Correct. I believe in terms of if we were engaged, I know the villages due for an RFP on the audit process there, but if we were engaged, yes, I mean, working with the team here now that you have consistent staffing in place for that would be able to allow to get back on schedule.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Anything to add, Manager Ewald? Okay. All right, we were ready to move on to 4B, review of Public Service Commission rate case submitted on behalf of the Shorewood Water Utility, and overview of final lead and copper rule improvements by City Water.
Good evening, everybody.
Good
I'm
evening.
Tom Nunnig with City Water. Been here for a couple of other meetings as well as we kind of work through this issue here. So I kind of put together a PowerPoint presentation that kind of talks a little bit about the rate case and kind of leads into some of the drivers behind the rate case. So yep, there it is. So we'll start with their lead service replacement update, which is the real driver behind the rate case. So we'll talk about the regulatory update, which just happened about a month or so ago. We'll talk about the village private lead service line grant program, our projects that we've got scheduled over the next 3 years, how they roll into the rate case, what the financial impact is going to be for our customers, and then what the next steps are. So we've been talking about this for a while now. In 1991, we have the lead and copper rule where we've been sampling for lead and copper levels in the water utility. There's been revisions to that rule. In 2021, EPA had a lead and copper rule revision where they significantly changed a number of things. They've improved our communications that we have to have with our customers. They improved the sampling protocols and the locations that we have to take the samples at. They wanted us to increase the frequency of the samples. They were going to use our sample results to drive the lead service line replacement program for each community. They wanted to replace both the public side and the private side service lateral at the same time. They weren't going to allow any partial replacements. We had to do a water service line material inventory, both on the public side and the private side, and then develop a service line replacement plan. This was all published in 2021. And shortly after it was published, EPA said, well, hang on a minute. We don't think this went far enough. And so we're going to have another set of rules that we're going to be coming out with in a couple of years. Well, it took them until October of 2024, and they came out and finally published the lead and copper rule improvements. And this is what we've kind of been talking about the last 2 years. And the biggest change from this LCRR, the revisions to the improvements, where they removed the sample results driving our lead service replacement program. So we're not going to base it on the sample results anymore. We're going to base it on all the lead needs to be removed in 10 years. We're going to give you 10 years to get out both the public and the private side lead. If you had, like the village does, a large amount of lead services compared to the overall size of the village, then if you have a certain ratio, exceed a certain ratio, then you can apply for an extension, which I believe the village will be granted that. But we still, because this rule just was published at the end of October, we're still waiting for guidance from EPA and DNR for that. But they also walked back some of the language that was in the lead and copper rule revisions on the private side. So before they said, no more partials, you got to do both. And now they kind of walked that back and they said, well, on the private side, the utility has to replace what they can control, right? And to me, that's the public side. And they also said, if you have control on the private side, well, then you need to replace that as well. Well, what does that mean? What does control mean? Right? So that is a little bit of a gray area. Again, we're waiting on guidance for how that's going to go. But they said, if you don't control it, then you have to give the private homeowner you have to give them 4 opportunities to replace their service. And if they don't replace it, then you move on. Now that'll start up again when the home sells and there's a new homeowner in the home. That 4 chances, I guess, start up again. But that's kind of some of the bigger changes to the rule. The other change is that the maximum contaminant level went from 15 parts per billion down to 10 parts per billion. So they really don't want water systems to kind of treat their way out of this. They want you to get the lead services out. So, and anticipating all of this, the Village of Short has kind of been ahead of the curve and developing some of their policies. I'll get to that in a minute here. The municipality must also offer some sort of funding to the private side homeowner if they can't pay for that fee up front. So if that's a low interest loan or if that might be a small interest loan, but we have to offer some sort of financing to the homeowner on the private side replacement. We had to finish our inventory and turn that in on October 16th of this year. That date did not change from the lead and copper rule revision. The village did that. We had to notify our customers within 30 days after that inventory. That also happened. And that'll be a yearly thing moving forward now. And then our lead and copper rule, or our lead service line replacement plan, is due 3 years after this improvement rule was finalized. So that won't be due until 2027. So our service line inventory, I just kind of want to give you a brief update of where we are at. Based on our first go through of all the information, our total service line, active service lines are 3,543. Of that, we've got about 2,403 that we have a confirmed lead service line. That is on either the public or the private side or both. So if one side of the service line has lead in it, we've got to send out a letter to our customers saying that you've got a lead service line, it's confirmed. Here's the actions that you need to take to help minimize your risks for lead exposure. So this next bullet that I've got in on the slide is that the utility will need 90 customers with a confirmed lead service line to participate in the 2028 sampling lead and copper program. So, and I mentioned before that the increased amount of frequency that we're going to have for sampling starting in 28, we're going to have to sample at least 60 homes for their lead level, where normally we would only sample 30 because we've been always under the MCL, the maximum contaminant limit. But now they want us to go back go on a full sampling plan, which is 60 for the size of the village, and then look at those 60, and then we'll see where we are with our, if we're above the maximum contaminant level or not. That'll also trigger some things that we'll have to do. So doesn't hurt to start planning for that. As I've mentioned to utility staff, that it's already difficult to get just the 45 or just the 30, I'm sorry, that we've been doing. Now we have to get double that. So they'll be working on that over the next couple of years in formulating that list. The letters that we sent out to our customers, again, was required by lead and copper rule improvements. We had to notify our customers if we did not know what they had, if it was an unknown service level that may contain lead or galvanized. And we also had to notify them if we did have a confirmed lead service line. The village sent out two types of letters, one with a confirmed lead service and one with an unknown service line. If you got a letter with an unknown service line, that means that you probably need to schedule an appointment and have staff come out there. Fortunately, we don't have that many of them. I think we're under 50. So staff has been working on that. And each letter, we were required to contain the health effects of lead in the drinking water. So that's language that we could not change. That came directly from EPA. We also put in there, and this is, we wanted to make sure that all of our customers knew this. I think this is a very good and important note, is that lead is not found in the treated drinking water leaving Milwaukee Water Works, the treatment facility. We're not providing water to our customers that has lead in it. What happens is when water sits in a lead service, that's when lead can get in the water. All right. So that goes back to the importance of getting out these lead services. So it's not something that we're putting in the water. It's something that happens. It's a byproduct of sitting in a lead service. The only way to minimize that is to get rid of the lead service. So we've been talking about that as I mentioned for a while, and the village has done a really good job of being proactive in getting those lead services to be removed. With our programs over the past couple of years, we've been removing the public side and as much of the private side as we can. And in fact, in 2022, the village did what's called a private lead service line replacement program with the Public Service Commission. So we went to the Public Service Commission and we said, we want to start a program where we are able to collect additional revenue through our utility rates so that we can offer homeowners on the private side for the replacement a 50% grant to help pay for that. And then the homeowner has to, pay for the other 50%. In order to do that, we had to pass an ordinance that required the private side lead service to be replaced. So we have an ordinance in place that says if we are doing a project on the village public side, the homeowner has to replace it on the private side. That's a little bit more strict than what we saw the lead and copper rule improvements come out with. But in order to have this program at the PSC, that is it's mandated by PSC. So we can't really change that. So as I mentioned, we're going to give 50% of the cost of the private lead service line replacement as a grant to the homeowner. And then that other 50% cost is a loan that the utility can give to the homeowner to help pay for that. The homeowner then can pay that off over 3 years on their quarterly utility bills, so 12 equal payments, and there's a 0% interest for that. Now, what comes into play here is there is money that is available through the bill funding from the federal government through the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program at DNR. And they have, on the private side, they have what's called principal forgiveness money. And the village does have an area in the village that will qualify for principal forgiveness. That money then would be used to offset the amount of cost for that private side lead lateral replacement. So it's based on census tract. And like I mentioned, we've got one census tract. It's Census Tract 804 that qualifies for that. That's the next slide here. So Census Tract 804 is in an area where we have 75% principal forgiveness. And it extends from, it's kind of that southwest quadrant of the village, right? From Capitol Drive south, from, I think that's Maryland Avenue, to the west over to the river, and then to the village limits at the south at Edgewood Avenue. So homeowners in that area that have a lead service on the private side qualify for 75% principal forgiveness. So that means we've got a loan. If we received a loan from the DNR through the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. It awarded $2.3 million to the village to be used in this area. And 75% of that money, or about 1.8 million, is principal forgiveness. So that's money that we do not have to pay back to DNR. So that's significant. I mean, this can really help drive down the cost for these homeowners in this area for their private lead service line replacement. So one of the things that we're looking at now doesn't change what we're doing with our rate case, but one of the things that we're doing is how can we maximize that money in this area for our upcoming projects within the next two to 3 years. And we'll get into that. I think that's also on the agenda here on the next item. So our projects that we've got scheduled over the next 3 years, in 2025, we're doing Lake Drive. We're locked into that, right? About $2.2 million for public water main and public service lateral replacement. We're estimating about 133 private lead service lines replaced during that time as well. In 2026, we're estimating about 300 private lead service line replacements as part of that DNR grant money that we received. We've got regular water main. Yes. That's 2026, correct. And we also have in the rate case built in about $2.6 million on public side infrastructure replacement. Initially, we had said we'd do about 1.1 million on water main replacement and about 1.5 million on public service lateral. With the grant money that we have from the DNR, we think we'll probably put all of that into replacing the public side laterals in Census Tract 804. Right, so there probably won't be a water main replacement, but that doesn't change the amount of capital improvements that we're planning for 2026 in the PSC rate case. So it won't change any of the results or inputs, I guess, that we have in the rate case. We also have the Oakland Avenue meter pit replacement in 2026. And then in 2027, we have budgeted, again, $2.6 million in public water utility asset replacement, and then about 160 private lead service lines to be replaced as well. So that's all the capital that we've got kind of planned over these next 3 years that feed into our rate case. And it's important to note that because as we look at our rate case, right, we want to make sure that we're capturing not only our capital, but we're also capturing what our operation and maintenance costs as well. So the slide says that we've submitted a conventional rate case to the PSC last week. That actually did not happen because of all the, I would say, frantic information that we've been getting on the Census Tract 804 and the DNR principal forgiveness loan and how we can use that money. So we've been having quite a bit of conversations at the staff level as to what we can do with that to make sure that we can maximize that grant money. So we didn't get it filed last week. We're hoping to get it filed this week. And a normal conventional rate case with PSC, they just look at 1 year. Remember, I showed you the slide that had the 3 years with the 3 different work that we're doing. They would say, we just want to look at 2025. And then they would make a rate case based on the test year of 2025, what we're going to be doing in 25. They'd say, here's your rates. Well, then for 2026, we're also doing a significant investment. We'd have to go back with another full rate case another year later, and then another one in 27. And we've sat with PSC and we've talked about that's just not feasible. It's not feasible for staff to continually to do an annual conventional rate case because they take 6 to 9 months sometimes. And we want to make sure that we give our customers a heads up that here's the increases that are coming. Here's how you can budget for at least the next 3 years. We only wanted to do 3 years because PSC felt that they could do that. They do a 2-year one right now, but it has to be the same project. We're talking 3 different projects now. So this is new for them. This is going to take a little bit longer because this will have to go to the full commission for approval. But I really think this is going to pave the way for other communities similar to Shorewood that want to see what can we do for the next 3 years rather than have these big spikes every year of a 10% or 12% and not giving our customers some time to plan for that. So PSC was very open to that idea. In our application, we include our 50% private lead service line grant program. This is unique here again for the village and staff level. We've talked about this. One of the biggest things that you can do to help minimize cost is your pilot. So pilot is your payment in lieu of taxes. The water utility has a dollar value associated with it, and we pay tax on that dollar value. But when we start talking about all this asset replacement, water main, service line that went in $2 to $3 a foot, we're talking about water main going in at $300 a foot, right? The value of our assets are going to increase dramatically, which means our pilot's going to dramatically increase. So what we wanted to do to help keep costs down for our customers is we're going to cap that pilot during this 3-year window. We took what we felt the pilot would be for 2025, and we're saying, let's cap it at that for 3 years. Then when we go in for another rate case in 3 years, we'll look at it, and then we can adjust that pilot at that time as well. That's unique. There's not a lot of communities that do that. PSC doesn't really have rules associated with the pilot. It's up to the municipality. We just have to go in there and tell them what we want to do with our pilot. So that's one of the areas that, as we talked on the staff level, how can we minimize this rate case? That was one of the areas of significance that I think will help. Now, that also means we're providing less money to the general fund. I get that. There's two sides of that story here. But
It's
as
a payment we paid.
correct, that is. But the 200, like I said, the $250,000 is based on what we would see that pilot be in 2025 with the improvements that we're planning in 2025. So we're not reducing it by anything. We're still having it go up, just not at the accelerated rate that it would if we didn't put a cap on. We also have an additional staff position to help manage the lead replacement program, because we're talking about a lot of lead being replaced here. Staff felt that we needed another person to help with that. The current staff level wouldn't be able to do all the work that they've got along with managing this program. We also incorporated the recently completed staff compensation or salary study that was done at the village. So we've increased staff compensation for those 3 years. And we included the projects that I had mentioned before from 25 through 27. So we put that into our financial model that we have that we base on how PSC develops their rates. And what what came out was our cumulative increases. That's how PSC does their rate case. They do it by a cumulative increase from your current rate. So in 2025, we'd see about a 41% rate increase, pretty big bump. Well, the reason for that big bump is that we are now funding that private lead service line replacement program with PSC. So we've got to collect rates so that we can fund that 50% grant that we're going to give to customers. Once we start funding that, that is something that we're collecting on an annual basis. So our rate increase then in 26 and in 27 is much less. And so the impact to our customers, you'll see on the next slide here. So what we did was we took our rates, and I apologize here, the last line should say year 2027. But in 2024, we based this on an annual or an average residential customer. So an average residential customer in the village uses about 1,800 cubic feet per quarter, which is about 13,500 gallons. Your bill in 2024, if that was your average amount of water use for a residential customer, would be about $105 per quarter on your utility bill. Again, that's just the water portion of the utility bill. We took the annual increases. We put that in for 25, 26, and 27. Again, in 2025, we're showing that 41.5% increase. That would make that quarterly bill go up by about $43 per quarter. In 2026, we would see that cumulative increase rise to 55%. That would make that water bill go up, roughly about $15 per quarter. And then in 2026, again, we'll see that cumulative increase rise to 65% from our 2024 rates, okay? Which means that it would be about another $10 per quarter increase in 2027. So that's kind of the financial impact right now. If you, over this rate case for the 3-year period, today you'd pay about $105 per quarter on your bill. After 2027, you'd be paying about $173 per quarter. So it's a cumulative increase of about $68 per quarter. And again, that is what our estimate is based on the rate case today. Going to go to PSC. They'll have a lot of questions for us. We don't actually get to say what the rates are going to be. PSC will tell us what the rates will be, but we get to negotiate with them. This is kind of our starting point where we feel this is where it should come out. It might be a little bit different based on some of the things that they have for us, but this is kind of where we feel ballpark wise, we feel pretty comfortable with these numbers. Our next steps, as I mentioned, the annual submission of our inventory and our customer notification, that has to happen every year. So customers will be getting a letter every single year moving forward until their lead service is replaced. We'll start working on the lead service replacement plan, where we've got to work on those new sampling protocols, locations. We want to make sure that we really spell out the grant and loan for the private side lead service replacements, what our funding sources are going to be for this program moving forward, what our communication strategy is going to be. Just a side note on the communication strategy, DNR is offering a grant to municipalities who come forward with a communication strategy. And we're working with North Shore Health Department to put together that strategy and apply for that grant money. Be $150,000 over a 2-year period. So we're working to apply to get that grant money as well to help feed into this program. We're trying to do everything we can for any money that's available, that we're trying to go after it, because we realize we've got a lot of lead services here. There's a lot of work that we need to do. So whatever help we can get, we're going to apply for it. We'll work on their recommended replacement schedule. You know, how much water mains we're replacing, how many lead services we're replacing on an annual basis, what our implementation strategy is going to be, and then what the timeline is as well. Like I mentioned, we'll work on that in 2025. Again, you know, it's going to change on an annual basis based on updates from the industry. I put that in there because last Friday, American Water Works Association filed lawsuit against EPA and the lead and copper rule improvements, challenging a couple of the rules. 2 rules that they're challenging is the private side lead lateral replacement and the 10-year requirement. So even though we have to start planning for this, we have to start working towards this, things are going to change over the next couple of years, and this is going to just continue to keep changing, especially with changes in the administration, whatnot. And then, you know, our plan is due in 2027. So as of right now. So all that to say that our next steps then are going to be to get that service, the PSC rate case turned into PSC, and then start the ball rolling with that. Because we think that's going to, again, be about a 6 to 9 month process. So before we can implement those rates, you know, they're not going to hit our customers until probably 3rd quarter of 2025. With that, I'll
All right.
take any questions.
It's a
know there's
lot of information.
Right.
Questions at this time?
Sorry, I have a quick question about the 75% principal forgiveness area. Or is it 75? And I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Is it 75% of the total, or the 75% of the 50% that they would be responsible for?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So
that's a big difference.
it is. So it's 75% of the cost to replace the private side service lateral. So what we would do, and I'm just going to throw numbers out here that
Yeah.
are nice and round. Please don't read in any of these numbers. Okay. So let's say it's $10,000 to replace a private lead service line. 75% of that's principal forgiveness. So $7,500. That's grant money that would go against that. Then the other $2,500 that's left would be the responsibility of the homeowner to pay. Now, our grant program that we have with PSC says 50% of that can come from utility rates. So $1,250. And then the homeowner would be responsible for $1,250. That's how that would work in this principal forgiveness area. Sure.
We,
But you don't live in that area, so
Okay.
good luck.
I have a slightly
different read on that policy.
Okay.
So our policy states that the utility will cover 50% of the cost of a private side replacement.
That's $5,000. Using his.
Yep. But the policy specifically states that of the remaining 50%, up to 25% can be covered by grants. It does state that. So we will likely have to do some tweaks to that policy and bring that back to you. And then you'll be able to weigh in on exactly how that gets applied.
Okay. Thank you.
That's what we had talked about. So, and the reason that we want to make that change is the money that we've been awarded can only be used in this area.
Right.
And if we keep it the way that Leanne had mentioned, that we only use 50% of this grant money goes to the private homeowner, we're not going to use all that money. And we can't use it in any other area of the village. So we want to try to maximize the benefit to these residents here. Because if we can maximize the benefit to them, that also means that it's less money we have to collect in our utility rates from all of our other customers. So it not only helps the customers in this area, but it helps all of our customers throughout the village because we're collecting less additional dollars for our grant program through the PSC.
Okay. Thank you.
Other?
I'll just say briefly, I appreciate all the information. And I'm glad that we as a community have been working so hard on this for so long. And that we have such a good plan in place overall. Just, getting this lead out of the water is so important. It's such a big undertaking. And I know it's nobody here's fault that they laid all those pipes with lead back then, but that the task is on us to do it. So I'm glad that we're taking such a proactive approach and that you're looking for so much grant money to get for our community. Just real quick with regards to the grant money is for most of these grants we're applying for is part of the calculation, the pure percentage of lead pipes that we have compared to other communities. I mean, if they're debating between our community and another community to get some money, I mean, we have so much more than
Right.
every other community in the state.
So it's all based on how the DNR does their principal forgiveness, and they've got a formula for that based on income level, based on density, and based on the annual income level of the community compared to the average income level for the state of Wisconsin for a homeowner. So the rules are kind of all set up in place. It's not based on how many lead services you have in your community. It's based on income for the most part.
Am I correct in remembering, Rebecca, that that census tract falls into that category because of the large amount of affordable housing we have in that census tract? Okay.
Are you referring to River Park
I am.
apartments?
All right.
Tom, you're doing such a great job. Do you want to move on to the next one?
On the next item.
All right, with that,
I did have one question.
Yeah.
You call it a 3-year test case, so we are requesting 3 test years. Does that mean that because it's something new, regularly done 3-year, that's why?
Well, on the application, they always call the year that you go in with all your information the test year. So, but yeah, this is the first time that anybody's asked for a 3-year rate increase, so I've done a number of rate increases, and the number one comment from the general public is always, how come we have to take such a big hit in this year? Why can't this be feathered in over a 3 or 5 year period? Well, this is what we're trying to do now. Instead of saying, here's one big hit, we're trying to make this more of a gradual increase to our customers. Still going to be a hit to them. There's no doubt about it. I don't want to sugarcoat that, but yeah, it's at least something that they can plan for now, be prepared for.
all right, thank you. With that, we'll move to 4C, update on options for 2025 Safe Drinking Water Loan Program for private lead service lateral replacements.
We need to take this as well, or?
Sure. I'd welcome it.
Okay, so,
Rewritten it so many times by the time we got to this version.
so as I mentioned before, there's been a lot of discussion as to what to do here with the principal forgiveness money for 804. And, you know, we had always talked about, we're trying to do as much water main replacement as possible with the lead service line replacement. But this money only has a 2-year window that we can use it in, right? So once we close on the loan, we've got 2 years to get the work done. We would never be able to do a full water main replacement, lead service line replacement in this entire area if that was the case. We couldn't do it in 2 years. So we came up with 2 different options as to what we could do with the money. So the first was, well, let me just kind of back up a minute and just kind of talk about the key requirements of that loan, right? It can only be used to fund the private side. It can only be used to fund a full replacement of a lead service line, which means we can't use it just on the private side and not replace the public side. We have to do both, which means that we've got to come up with money to fund the public side. It's only in Census Tract 804, which you talked about, 75% principal forgiveness. It must meet Davis-Bacon wage rates. And then we must have biddable set of plans and specifications and a construction contract submitted by May 30th of 2025. So pretty quick here. The nice thing about that is we're talking, the first option is just to do a service line replacement project only, where we're not replacing any of the water mains. We have aging water mains in that area. We've talked about them being replaced before, but again, we've only got 2 years to use this money. The best way to do it in this first option is to replace just the laterals in this location. We're replacing the private side and replacing the public side, and we're putting them into our existing mains in those areas.
Would this be the 3 or 2?
Correct. Yep. Yep. And in that area, I believe, so, and again, these are all budget numbers that we're, you know, putting around here. So we've mentioned that 300 private side service lateral replacements in the PSC rate case. We've got about 400 in this area. And so hopefully if we can, you know, package this together, maybe we can get close to 400 done. Depends upon what the costs are going to be, right? But we, you know, we've got $2.37 million to work with. We now have to come up with funding on the public side. And that's that $2.5 million that I had mentioned that we've got for public side asset replacement scheduled for 26. We could use that. The issue is that we've got to come up with funding for it pretty quickly, because we have to close on this loan by September of 2025. So we're going to have to make sure that we've got funding in place for the public side at that same time. Otherwise, DNR may not grant us that loan, right? And we don't want to give back the money if we don't have to. So that's the first option, is that we're doing the service line replacement only. It really is a targeting our lead removal for, you know, roughly those 400 customers in that area. It's prioritizing the lead service replacement in the most disadvantaged census tract in the village. It uses principal forgiveness to help lower the cost to all of our ratepayers. You know, we're taking timely action on this. The bill funding runs out in 2026, and there's, you know, no indication of it, what the funding level will be moving forward after this with the new administration. So we don't know. So why not take advantage of the money that we have available to us today that we know, rather than wait to see if something may or may not be better in the future. And it's our focused solution. It addresses specific issue of that lead service line removal. We're showing our customers that, yeah, we're serious about getting our lead out. Again, some of the disadvantages of this option would be the limited scope, and that is we're just replacing those lead services. So we're still going to have issues with that older main in that area, but maybe it's something we have to come back to in another 20 years. Hopefully it's 20 years, not sooner, to replace the mains in that area, because they are old. You know, they're all pre-1940 water main. So when you look at the life cycle of a water main, you know, 75 to 100 years, we're coming up on that pretty quickly here.
Am I correct in assuming that it becomes, I mean, it's an infrastructure issue, obviously, because of the age of the mains, but if you remove the lead service laterals, you remove the health risk, right?
That's
There's
correct.
no lead there's no lead in the mains. Once you take out the laterals, you're fine.
So we have some leaded joints in the main, but
Okay.
it's so small compared to the overall area of the main that, and when we've tested samples of water in the main itself, we don't get lead.
Okay.
So
Because when I'm looking at the differences, it's really, option one is the taking care of the health of the residents, but you might potentially eat it on the mains. Whereas option two, you take care of them, you take care of everything, but there might not be the money there. And
Correct.
it prolongs the amount of time that lead remains because you haven't removed it.
yeah, especially in this area. So yeah, option two is kind of saying we're going to decline the money because we can't get this all done in a 2-year period.
Mhm.
And we'll reapply for it in 2026 with more water main and public side lateral replacements as part of that as well. But again, we've got about, I think I said about 4.5 miles of water main in that area. So there's just no way that we'd be able to get that done in a 2 to 3-year period. It'd be more like a 5-year period if we wanted to replace all the water main in that area along with the lead laterals. And we're only focused in this one area.
And we're assuming that in 2026, if we deny it now and try to reapply, we're assuming that the funds will still exist in 26.
The bill funding will exist in 26. How much of it we would be awarded remains to be seen. We had actually applied for more this past year, but between Milwaukee and South Milwaukee, they ate up the other principal forgiveness areas. And so there's gonna be more communities that are gonna be going after this money, I think in 26 as well.
So we also lose our competitive advantage by going later.
correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So what's the biggest challenge for us to going with option one? Is it coming up with the 2.5 million?
Yes. On the-
Well, I know where 5.5 is.
Okay.
I know where 20%. 2 million. We have the TID money.
Maybe we
That's
also have
20% of that.
parking.
So I know that we've got some meetings scheduled this week to talk with your financial advisors on this as well, as we're trying to feverishly work towards figuring out a plan for this, because we want to make sure that we can maximize this money if at all possible.
So with regards to this item on the agenda tonight, we wanted to provide an update. When I said the memo was rewritten 3 times, it was within a span of a week based upon different interpretations and conversation with the DNR. And everyone's kind of setting up their systems in terms of how they process this type of funding. It's nuanced. It's not simple. So we wanted to share with you what we were learning as we were learning it, because it can be a lot to digest. There are 2 different approaches. We would like the board to provide comment and weigh in and which one you think is most appropriate, because time is of the essence. So you saw that within the memo, there was tactically immediate next steps that will need to be done by either engaging engineers on agreements or vice versa. And we want to be able to do that so that we can keep things going as expeditiously as we can to meet the requirements for loan closure. If that's what the board immediately wants to decide on for 2025, even if you did defer on this funding and went to reapply in 2026, that would include a water main component, which includes whole nother set of track of funding through the Safe Water Loan Program. That's not the same, a different engineering approach. So we wanted to kind of hear from you guys and also allow you to learn with us as we're going through this, because it's fluid.
So clarify procedurally, this isn't agended for action.
Correct.
So asking for direction and so basically just with what's provided to us here.
Correct. Because this is the best that we know.
Mhm.
for right now. And as Tom said, we're going to continue to have meetings this week, Wednesday with the DNR and with our financial advisor. We're going to continue these discussions because there's a lot of nuance to figure out to make sure that we're on the right track and can meet the requirements in the timely fashion.
All right, so this is a very high level request for guidance. So option 1, 2, or 3. Trustee Kudo?
I mean, I'm
Only
in
one or two.
Oh,
one or
only-
two. Yeah, there's only two options.
It was repeated twice.
I'm in
Okay.
favor of option 1 at this point, recognizing that we would have to find the 2.5. For me, it takes care of a few things. One, the health of the residents, specifically in that track, to get those lead lines out as soon as humanly possible. I understand we might end up eating a bit of a cost on mains because they are deteriorating. They're very old. But, I don't think that the residents of that track should suffer any longer because of an infrastructure issue as opposed to a health issue. What I would be very interested in, however, is to Trustee Stokebrand's point, figuring out every conceivable way that we could, the money we could use to offset that $2.5 million. So whether that's, the resources that she mentioned, or if this was a place we could apply the parking that we've mentioned in the past, the 400 or 500,000 in parking, to bring that number down as quickly as humanly possible. But I don't have really any faith that we are going to find ourselves in a favorable position like this in 2026, given the new administration, as well as the fact that other communities are going to start stepping up and trying to take more of this pot of money. And so I think we're in a unique situation right now. And if we can get in and get those 400 taken care of, not only does that, help us in the long run, but as was outlined, could potentially help all the other residents in the community by making that grant money more available to them, or the grant money that we take out a little bit less. So if I'm understanding everything correctly, that's where I'm at. Option 1.
All right. To keep it simple, other interest in option 1?
Yep.
Okay.
I was
Any-
persuasive.
Interest in option 2? Okay, do you have consensus on direction?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Could I just had one quick question though? Part of my concern with option 1, which I think is the right way to go, I think we need to just try to get at this as quickly as possible, which is what we've been doing for the past few years with those water mains. I mean, sometimes some of our mains are so old. Just something to keep in the back of our mind while we're planning this is like, what are we going to do if we tap into a main to change the lateral and the whole thing just crumbles apart? I just would want to make sure we're prepared to deal with that. And then the second piece of that is that, as you mentioned, sometimes it's like soldered with lead and things like that. I don't know the exact details of it, but that can sometimes, when you mess with the pipe, it can jostle some of that lead loose. So just like those would be my two things to keep in mind with those mains, is that we could destroy a main or potentially cause some more lead to go in the water,
Right.
through the construction process. So
That's part of the discussions that we're having as well right now. City of Milwaukee is doing just lateral replacements only, not any of the mains. So getting in touch with them, finding out what they're doing when they're coming across the main that is highly suspect in the field when we're exposing it, is some of the things that we want to research. And then the other thing is, as part of the rule, it doesn't matter when we do this. Whenever we do a lead lateral replacement, we have to provide a filter pitcher to that customer, so that they'll get instructions on how to use that. I think it comes with a 6-month replacement cartridge as well. So they've got time there. And then the research behind that is generally within about a month's time, you'll see the lead levels start to go down after you've done at least a partial replacement. On a replacement inside the home, again, yeah, they're going to have galvanized plumbing inside of the home that can have a little bit of lead in there. But we'll see that after about a month or so that those levels really go down, and that, they've got a filter pitcher for 6 months in case you need it.
Any final questions?
Just one last one, sorry. You mentioned moving the testing from 30 to 60 under the new requirements and that you had a hard time finding 30 folks to, is it hard time finding 30 folks to participate, or did that meet qualifications, or?
To participate. Yeah. So it's tough to get people to participate. And before it was tough because lead really wasn't on the radar screen like it has been over the past couple of years. And especially now with the letters that went out to everybody. So we might not have an issue with that. But as we replace lead services, you know, those numbers will start to dwindle. But yeah, that's the requirement, is that we have to try to get 60, or we want 90 people. We need a minimum of 60. But we need 90 that want to participate. And, you know, in other communities, when they've found out about the lead, people have jumped right on it and said, yeah, we'll do it. It is going to be a little bit of a pain because we'll now have to collect 5 liters worth of samples in 2028. But yeah, it's just a matter of getting the right people to do it.
I'm wondering if it becomes a problem, can village administration, Leanne or whomever, Rebecca, let us know. That's probably an area where we as trustees in the village can be helpful in trying to get to that number of 90.
Do they have to be spread geographically?
No,
Oh, it could be like all in one.
they just have to have a lead service line.
All right. Okay.
Fairly straight.
Yeah, it's easy. Just fill up a couple jugs of empty jugs.
Yeah, I mean,
We could,
I think we could be very helpful.
I like
if-
this,
If you're trying to do a
grassroots.
problem.
grassroots canvassing. We'll do it. Yep, exactly. All right, thank you very much. That concludes special orders business for this evening. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by trustee Lynn, seconded by trustee Kudo or Arndorfer? Who was it?
Definitely.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, there are no items removed from the consent agenda. Item 7, public hearing, we have none this evening. Item 8, citizens to be heard. This item is for matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to be heard on a matter not on the agenda this evening? If so, you can come off mute if you're online or come to the podium. All right, I'm not seeing anyone, so we will close that item and move on to new business. 9A, consider Oakland Avenue Design Contract Amendment 3. So this comes to us from Director Bushlick, and there is a memo. We can take technical questions or a motion. Any questions for the director?
I'd be happy to make a motion.
Okay,
So I move to approve the North Oakland Avenue Reconstruction Design Contract Amendment 3 with Clark Dietz in the amount of $13,300, with the understanding that the village of Whitefish Bay will reimburse Shorewood its share of the design costs as determined by the project engineer upon completion of the design work.
Second.
motion by trustee Lynn, seconded by trustee Arndorfer. Any discussion? Oh, sorry. Trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Arndorfer. Any discussion? Yes.
So implicit in this is that you've already spoken with Whitefish Bay and they've agreed to all this. Did you say we'd be getting a memorandum of understanding, or is this all wrapped up in one here?
We've been in contact with Whitefish Bay. And yes, upon completion of the design work and the engineer's identification of a cost estimate and an attributable percentage per community, then I'll be finishing the MOU and that'll come before.
All right, hearing no further discussion, will this be a roll call vote or a voice vote? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. 9B, review of policy 49, work plans, village initiatives and task assignments. This comes to us from Community and Business Relations with a recommendation for approval. It was shared with committee chairs via email. And I know that it was discussed at committee of the Parks and Open Spaces Committee earlier or last week. Trustee Kudo, do you want to give us as chair of the Community and Business Relations, do you want to give us a recap of your recommendation?
There is no easy recap of this. It's quite involved with the procedures that are being set forth. Really what this does is this helps outline for community, for committees, for committee chairs, for trustees and staff, the processes by which we take up initiatives throughout the village. So whether it's task assignments or longer term initiatives, this really sets forth how we're going to handle those and sets forth the community's ability to engage with the village, either directly through a trustee or through committees or otherwise. There's been a lot of back and forth as of late between all of the aforementioned parties, how folks can bring stuff before the board or have stuff passed. This is an attempt to outline again that process. I would be interested to hear from Manager Ewald the response that we got from committee chairs, if any, when the policy 49 was sent to them.
No response.
Okay. So each committee chair has been advised. We've talked about this on more than one occasion. The policies speak for themselves. What we really tried to do was establish an understanding not only for staff, but for trustees, committee chairs again, and then residents. You know, there are different avenues by which you can engage. You can go directly to a trustee and sort of have the trustee take your proposal and help shepherd it through the process. You can go through committees. In some very limited instances, you can go, directly to the manager, to the village manager. But really, this is sort of try to codify what was a dirty process to get all this stuff done. So it's probably not perfect. In fact, I know it's not perfect. It will probably need some revision as we move forward and just through implementation. But this was our first best effort on making the process better. So.
And this is an internal policy, so it's not an ordinance. And so just clarifying, yeah, we're just being asked to approve it this evening. So with that, open it for questions. We have a recommendation to approve from the Community and Business Relations. And I know that there was, we had a pretty lengthy discussion with the Parks Committee. Trustee Stokbrand, obviously as liaison, was there. I was present because it seems like there has been confusion over the past 2 years, particularly actually only with that committee, as to how to engage with moving initiatives forward. So I think I was able to explain that this is not an effort to limit. It's really an effort to balance workload and workflow in the way that's most fair and moves us forward, stewarding our sources as an entire team, staff, board, committees, residents, and therefore all committees too. So keeping in mind the range of needs that surface from time to time. So I thought it was really productive, and there were some minor suggestions. I don't think that they were substantive in any way. It was more clarification of timelines and things like that. But I don't see any reason to, I mean, I'm in support of this and would feel comfortable with this moving forward this evening.
I'll just say one last thing. One of the really important things to note in this is that the responsibility really falls to us as the board to determine what is handled and when it's handled. Like this was based on my experience going over this many, many times in different drafts that we had. This was not staff trying to carve out of a larger bureaucracy or different roles and responsibilities for themselves as it relates to saying yes or no to any of these initiatives. So in the end, if we want something passed and we want to work on something, we carry the water and we work with the committees. We work with residents that want this stuff done. It should not and it cannot go just to the village manager or the deputy manager or department heads to say yes or no on this stuff. So for anyone that might have a problem or a concern, all you need really are 4 votes. So get to a trustee, go to your liaison for your committee, get them on board so that they bring it back to the board. And at any point you can put anything on for a future item, future recommendation, and it falls within the process that we have for all of that. But this was an effort to frankly make the board more accountable for what gets put on and what doesn't get put on, so that staff wasn't having to bear the brunt of that responsibility.
Thank you. Yes, trustee Stokebrand?
So there were a lot of concerns brought up at the meeting on Tuesday that you were at, and I don't see any of those changes in this document. So I know Assistant Manager Anderson was there. Is there any way to defer this until we go through the items that we talked about? Because the changes are not.
Yeah, it was my understanding, just procedurally from the meeting, it wasn't my understanding that, or my expectation that Assistant Village Manager Anderson was responsible for taking those comments and moving them forward. If you recall, I asked that they be submitted in writing, typical to any other kind of revision process, and so that those are in writing and could have been considered.
So I have some, do you want me to go through them tonight, or do you want me to submit them in writing and we could defer this to the next meeting?
Do you know of a reason why? So it was the understanding from that committee chair, and I was not at this meeting, was the understanding from that committee chair that they didn't have to submit it in writing, or they didn't have to respond to the message from village manager, that it was going to be your responsibility to bring that to it? I'm wondering why, if they had concerns, they didn't reach out.
I know she had to leave early.
Well, there was actually, so my recollection of it was that the co-chairs were focused on procedurally how they would interact with the policy and what they were required to do and when, timeline. And so clarification around that, which on that level, it's not necessarily a policy amendment or revision. It was more clarification and encouraging them that that they would be supported to understand this. So I just recall Mr. Pendleton referencing some changes, I'm not really sure, and me saying to submit them in writing. And I remember you maybe noting some things in the draft, trustee Stokebrand,
Right,
about
and I can
maybe
go
some
through them,
dates that needed.
but I don't know if that's the best use of our time tonight.
Are they?
They're not substantive from what I recall. It was more of just
Well, but it's
clarifying.
important that the language be right. I mean, there was some forms that we use that are not mentioned in here.
I mean, you
I
can
mean,
make a
just-
motion to
just
defer.
From my perspective, I mean, the Parks and Public Spaces Committee wasn't tasked with writing this policy. We already had a committee that wrote this policy. I think Trustee Kudo did a good job of shepherding this through. And like he said, I mean, I think this is the best
first draft we can have. So, I mean, I'm happy to just approve the policy that was already created by a committee. And
I
not
guess-
just take like
Yeah.
one committee's suggestions, especially from the committee that was the one that caused some of the problems in the first place. I mean, I think we need to set a policy and proceed with it. And as a former chair of a committee, I think that would be extremely helpful. So,
I guess at this time procedurally, we should either take a motion. I mean, you can have further discussion, but ultimately it's about a motion to defer and then we don't need to discuss it at this time. Or a motion to adopt and we proceed. So it's 10 of 9. So keeping that in mind.
I really take offense at the, the reference that the Parks and Public Spaces Committee caused problems. I think they were looking for clarity and here we are. And so it can be a good thing, but I think it's important that we take input from the citizens. And I can go through a few things that we specifically talked about and agreed.
So as the chair of the committee, what I would prefer to do is, I would prefer to pass it, and I'm happy to have another committee meeting where the recommendations that are brought forth by any number of committees are addressed. And again, this is in some ways sort of a working policy in that we can change it. I'm not privy. I don't know what the recommendations are from that committee. I haven't seen them, so I don't.
There are things that would make it more clear to residents. I think it would help them understand how this is supposed to work. For example, the first one talks about identify prior year accomplishments in the annual report. You would also need to include goals and initiatives for the coming year in January, because otherwise how then in March would they submit their proposed initiatives? It doesn't mention anywhere in here the request to execute an initiative form, which staff has presented to committee members. I don't know, Rebecca, where would you like to see the request to execute an initiative form?
Okay. So I guess again, like I think what I would like to see is us pass this. And then if there are adjustments, I'm a little concerned that the committee chairs were given the opportunity to respond to the village manager and chose not to, specifically on this committee. But then to sort of have these things brought up during the board meeting. I understand the difficult position you're in because.
And I guess I thought Chris Anderson was doing this, so,
But again, if they didn't view them as substantive,
and we have staff.
But
at the
we would
meeting.
take, I guess at this time, I would like a motion to defer or a motion to approve.
I move to defer.
Is there a second? Motion fails for failure of second. Is there an alternative motion?
Sure, I will move to adopt policy 49.
second.
Motion by trustee Kudo, seconded by trustee Lynn. Further discussion?
Again, if there are substantive changes that folks want from that committee or any committee that we have in the village, please bring them forth, submit them to. I'm happy to take the submissions myself as the committee chair. I'm certainly the village manager, assistant village manager would be happy to take them. And then I would be more than happy to have a subsequent committee meeting where we discuss those and make any relevant changes that need to be made to make the policy better.
Yeah, I mean, given that we haven't heard from the committees since this was issued, I mean, I think I feel comfortable proceeding with the policy as submitted.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1. If somebody can help me out, I'm having trouble getting back to my agenda. We're concluded new.
Reports to
business.
village
Yeah,
officials.
reports. Okay. Report to village official, village president, there's a link to the ICC meeting. I want to thank trustee McGovern again for his work on the the resolution to support a request to the state government for assistance with lateral replacement. That resolution was introduced at the ICC and it was actually approved unanimously, which in one meeting, which I will say I certainly have not experienced. So that was momentous, I would say.
Yeah, it's a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Yeah, so thanks for all of that. And we did get thank yous from the other, our other partners on that action as well, for us taking the lead on that. This morning I addressed the civics class at the Shorewood High School, which was a real delight. It's the second year that I've been able to do that. And so hopefully they'll be inspired to serve in local government, the minute they turn 18. So with that, village trustees. Oh, and I did light the Christmas tree or the Winterfest tree. Great turnout, and just thank you to Everett, to the bid, for putting on such a great event. The businesses were packed that night. Okay, sorry.
So I just wanted to say to the group that I am not going to run for reelection this next election cycle. I've enjoyed this job tremendously over the past few years, and I'm happy to serve out the rest of my term. But I'm looking to take a little break in the future when my term is up, and just wanted to state clearly I'm not running again, and just let everybody know that that's the case for me. Please feel free to reach out with any other questions, but I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thanks for letting us know. And we'll say goodbye to you in the spring. So
There's no draft jury movement in the wings or anything.
I will not accept the nomination.
If nominated,
I am
you
not
will neither
seeking,
accept.
nor will I not accept.
all right, thank you. We should have known when the mustache came back, but there was trouble afoot. All right, other reports of trustees.
I just, I hate to come and follow that. Sorry, Jerry, but I just wanted to shout out and thank the residents that helped set up the ice rink over the weekend. Last year we had 5 solid days of ice skating, so hopefully we get at least 10 this year. But that rink is set up and it's just a giant pool right now, and probably will be like that for the next, month or so. So, but I just wanted to show my appreciation to all the volunteers that came out to lend a hand and help set that up over the weekend.
Trustee McGovern.
I'll just add that I attended the public meeting about the new bike and pedestrian safety plan, among other. I saw a bunch of us were there, but just wanted to, thank Bart for the draft plan, and just recognize the widespread support for additional public safety measures, making our streets safer for all users, drivers, pedestrians, bikers. A lot of interest in really getting something done on those issues.
Trustee Stokebrand.
I just would like to thank all the members of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee who were at the meeting on Tuesday. It was a good meeting. They covered a lot of ground. And also, we had about 30 people at that public information meeting. Trustee Kudo and I were there, in addition to Mr. McGovern. And so it was, staff was able to get the online feature going, which I think was important. I think maybe 5 people were online. There was a COVID outbreak. So, and it was pretty cold. And so the vulnerable people were able to attend also. And so I'd like to thank staff for, at the last minute, getting that online piece going. It's important to have at the Village Center. And I don't know what else we can do to make it easier to use so that there's no hesitation, because it's important. With COVID, we're not going back.
All right. Village Manager. All right. We have a couple of future items, or 1 or 2. And then we have a closed session. So Trustee Arndorfer.
All right. Yes, we have 2, both by me. I'm sorry, as it's 9 o'clock. The first one concerns parking. We this was prompted by just the recent discussions, well, not the, discussions since the summer about the budget, and the task that we're facing not only next year, but in the years ahead, given the infrastructure, replacement ahead of us, as well as additional rising costs. We just heard about, what we're going to be seeing in water costs in the years ahead. So I just think for a variety of reasons, it's time that we evaluate, parking meters or metered parking as an option as a alternative revenue source, for the village. Want to thank staff for including a question related to that on, the poll that we put out regarding high impact options. And, there was not a scientific poll per se, but nevertheless, I think the feedback that we got from that suggests that, the idea of metered parking does warrant, further investigation. Upon thinking about this and what our options were and whether, and looking at budget tasks that we do have ahead of us, one thing I was thinking about was if we're going to do, my motion would be to do a study, a feasibility and cost benefit analysis to determine, what could be done. If we're going to be doing that for the business district, I did want to take into account other possibilities as well for metered parking. The two that I was considering, or the two that, came to mind, either upon reflection or actually recommendations from residents, would be metered parking at village owned lots, and then village parking in areas proximate to the beach during the summer months. So Capitol and that part of Capitol, the eastern part of Capitol, as well as part of Lake. So just wanted to put that out. Just get feedback from the other thoughts from other trustees before I make a motion. Again, the idea is this would just be, reiterating a study to evaluate what the possibilities are, what kind of revenue possibilities are or are not, as the case may be. And just trying to make an educated, have an educated process moving forward about what the opportunities are given the budget situation that we're in.
Thank you. So at this time, just procedurally, I just want to put a cap on this because it is 9:00 at night. The question is, would you support a future item of consideration to consider doing a study? So
Correct.
it's just to put it on the agenda. It is not whether you would vote for such study or outcome of such study or the virtues or the scope of such study. That would go to committee. Okay, so it's simply what we're looking for is whether there's support to, or actually I would say to make a motion to take this as a future item of consideration. And if it passes, it passes. And if it fails, you have your answer. Just to streamline, to just make it really clear about what we're being asked to do tonight. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering, is it going to go to a committee, a standing
Or-
committee? Or
Yeah,
no?
I don't know.
Okay,
What, I'm
got it.
sorry.
No. It's okay. I just didn't know.
What would be the
in-
procedure?
I didn't know what the intention would be. If it was coming back, right, depending on the motion.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Full
Was that
board
in the
or-
memo and
Yeah.
I missed it?
No, because if the motion includes a specific committee, then it would go to that committee. If the motion doesn't include a specific committee,
Correct.
then it's the choice of the chair, what committee it goes to, right?
I would then ask to specify whether it's the board.
Yeah. So the
Going back to
question,
the board.
in the motion, it should say whether it goes to committee or to full board for consideration. And either one would be procedurally correct. And given the time constraints that we have to make this potentially impactful to the North Oakland design, is that ship has sailed?
Well, the design's 90% complete
Okay.
at this time.
I guess,
Yeah.
should I ask, is there a consideration that it should go straight to full board instead of committee first, just because of the nature of timing and,
I don't know what to expect from the process, so I think either is
Okay, so for that purpose, there is nothing wrong with indicating it should go to full board. It seems like if it goes to committee, that's not a problem. It doesn't pose a barrier to moving forward. Trustee Stokely.
My understanding about North Oakland is that it's curb to curb, and this would be beyond the curb. But I could be wrong. The other thing I'd like to say is on when the staff recommendation about, I would support that in using TID funds to conduct this survey. I'd add a fourth item. Number 1 is define geographic area, 2 specific rates, 3 hardware and technology. I would add number 4, recommendations for enforcement. And I would be in favor of moving this forward to, I guess it would be, it'd either be budget or public.
Or would it be community and business relations?
Or strategic initiatives, who knows?
Or DPW.
Strategic initiatives.
JP&L will not take this.
All right, guys, we're getting punch drunk. So please make a motion and specify a committee.
All right.
Final answer.
What's that? All right. Okay, move the. Okay, just to be clear, so what am I making? I mean, empowering a committee to analyze this and then make a recommendation, or?
To make a recommendation to retain a consultant, whatever
It was
the,
just to do further consideration.
At this point, you're just agenda.
Yeah, for your consideration.
Move to refer to possibility. Parking.
Okay.
Business.
Yeah, you can send it to us.
To do a study.
If you want,
All right.
or you can send it
All
to
right.
all of us.
Got it. All right. Move to refer to the Budget and Finance Committee, a proposed study for the, looking into feasibility and cost benefit analysis of implementing metered parking in the business district, including Oakland and Capitol and adjacent streets, village-owned lots, and roadways in proximity to Atwater Beach, including Capitol and Oakland during the summer months.
Got that, Joy?
Funded by proceeds of TID 5.
Second.
any discussion? This is pretty thorough. For someone who didn't know what to say.
I didn't know how to set it up.
He's a professional wordsmith. Like, this is what he does.
Well done, and he comes in with the undercut. Okay, anyway, I guess that was our further discussion.
No,
All
I
those in
wasn't
favor-
winning. I was just how I.
No, I'm not taking anything. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed?
Nay.
Oh,
Sorry.
and
Nay.
that's okay. Now I see how it's going without you running, it's like, it's just gonna be. Okay. Let's go. Number 2.
All right, number 2, consider release of a request for proposal for public works site. I mean, just short story. Ideally, before we make a decision on what we do with the DPW lot, I think it would be helpful to understand what, the possibilities for development are of that site. Not necessarily expecting any I would like to have people look at that and give us a perspective on what could be done with that site, recognizing that there may be some additional possibilities, but having a foundation for understanding of what could be done, I think would be helpful in potentially making a informed decision on how we proceed moving forward. I do think that before we do that, we would need to complete the site study, which I think will be completed by March, my understanding, but anyway, that's the intent here.
So it's definitely something the board can ask for. I don't believe that you're going to get a thoughtful submission from a developer on this site until they know at what time the site's going to be available, and that matches up with the WIDA schedule, which are 2 strong bits of feedback we heard for the last RFP process, because they will not want to show their hand in terms of what they want to do with the site, knowing that it's going to be public record in the midst of us not having clear definition of when that site's going to be released and available. So I think.
Or if it's released in
Or
a.
if
Correct. Right?
Mhm.
So it's, right, so in that, I don't anticipate receiving thoughtful responses. If you want to seek ideas by working with an architect or looking at different things that would be possible, that would be an avenue to perhaps pursue.
Are you looking at big picture? Like different
correct.
ideas, not like this is the
Correct.
development I want to put on
Yes.
there, but like we could put a pocket park here. We could put a,
Like what would work there?
farmer's market,
picture
you know,
versus-
Right. Correct.
ice rink,
A baseball park, like who knows?
indoor winter market in one of the buildings.
Go-kart course,
Okay.
right, all the things.
Is that's kind of the big picture,
Correct,
like
right.
thoughtfulness. Okay.
There are some architecture schools, professors that look for this sort of and so I just throw that out. I know, professor at UWM who has done ideas for senior housing UWM campus. It was like a studio for a senior class, and they worked in groups of 3, and there were 7 proposals for what to do with spaces around UWM. So that's,
If I may, I mean, could we refer this to committee to talk about what it could be and see if there's a there? Because I don't think we can flesh it out tonight. But we could make a motion to refer a conceptual discussion to committee to determine if there is a pathway to obtain ideas in lieu of action from the village. Well, I'm not making a motion, but yeah, I think it's got to be CBR.
Well, why not?
All right.
Only because it truly is.
Sure. We'll tackle it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Or Public Works, I guess. right?
Yeah,
But that's,
bring it. I'd love to have this conversation on Public
I
Works.
said yes first.
okay.
Come on. Don't you got
All
me
right.
So-
plate?
Okay, so. Okay, given. Yeah, so. Move that business and community relations take up a conceptual study for. Possible scenarios for redevelopment of the DPW site.
I'll second.
Okay. I never want to, I like supporting, brainstorming and things like that. I do agree with Manager Ewald that it seems like it would be hard to get information. So I'm comfortable with the committee, or I would support the committee discussing this in a possible scope of, I'm not going to rewrite your motion. I'll probably support it if everybody else thinks it's a good idea. And let's just leave it at that. So, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? You got yourself a committee agenda item. All right, thank you.
Kind of. Let's see.
So that's, all right, that concludes future items of consideration. We are now ready to move into closed session. Is there a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
You gotta
Oh,
read
I
it.
gotta do the thing. Damn.
Okay.
Village Board will consider moving into closed session. Wait, I move to, move to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, section 1985, 1E, to deliberate or negotiate the purchasing of public properties where competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session to discuss prospective properties for the new DPW site.
second.
All right, motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Stokebrand. Any discussion? All right, just for informational purposes, for people that are with us this evening, we'll convene into closed session. There's nothing for us to take action on coming out of closed session, but we will come out of closed session to adjourn for the evening. But there won't be anything, there won't be any action taken at the conclusion of that besides adjournment. So with that, it'll be a roll call vote.
Trustee McGovern,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Aye.
president McKay,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee Land.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right. Thank you for all the members of the public and the staff who are here this evening.